to the Morning Digest show. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us on this wonderful morning as we continue conversations that we keep having on matters leadership. And so I am your host, Reverend Albert Shitakwa from Green Pastures Tabernacle, Hebron City, and I'm happy to lead you in this conversation, or at least facilitate this conversation today. And I'm honored to have a good friend of mine who's not new to this show. He's been here before a number of times, Reverend Richard Chogo from Deliverance Church, Umoja. And so karibu sana, Rev.
Asante sana, Reverend.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be back here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so last week we began a conversation on the leadership pitfalls. And we just want to continue on this conversation because we've been navigating matters leadership for a while. And I think one of the areas that we need to look out for and watch out for is the pitfalls that can compromise our leadership. And so today we want to pick up that with Rev Chogo and look at aspects of leadership, and especially, or in particular, looking at the life of Moses and the leadership of Moses, and learn some things from him that can help us as leaders wherever we are. So join the conversation, invite your friends and family, share your comments and your thoughts, ask questions, because this is a conversation, so we want you to be part of the conversation. So ask questions, give your comments and feedback, and participate in this conversation as we continue on with the show. And so, Rev, last week we had this conversation on leadership pitfalls, and we just looked at some few things with Reverend Gigi. And a number of the things we looked at were like pride, insecurity, and greed, as some of those things that can become pitfalls for a leader. And so I know there is a lot we can talk about, but then I don't know whether we dive it straight into Moses, or do you want to touch on just that, what I've just mentioned, pride, greed, insecurity?
I mean, it will be, and I would agree with you, if we begin to get into those things, it will be like a rabbit hole, because there's a lot to say about all those things, pride and all that stuff. And there are many other things that can contribute towards the possibility of a leader. Pitfall means that this is a ditch that you fall into. You're probably unaware, or you dug it and you forgot. And so there are many things that endanger a leader. They are internal, they're external, and the most threatening are the internal ones that are part of you, but you're not seeing them.
And it's important to note that the most threatening are the internal.
The internal ones, that are part of you and you're not seeing them. And things like pride is one of those things that is, they say some of these things are like bad breath. You are the only one the only one who does not know you have bad breath. Everybody else around you knows you have bad breath.
That's really a sad reality.
So pride and certain attitudes, and pride is about attitude, and is just a negative attitude. And these are internal things. By the way, many times when a leader falls, it's mostly, even if there are external forces, there has to be, it's an inside job. It has to be an inside job. I mean, there is no devil enough that has got enough power, especially if you're a Christian leader. The devil does not have sufficient power to grip on you.
So we can't fix the blame for our fall.
You cannot. Every time as somebody interacts with me and they are in a crisis of sorts, the first thing I try to ask is, hey, let's examine the internal configuration and figure out one or two things. Let's start there before we even begin to deal with all my enemies, the elders in the church, the other people who are opposing me, my detractors. There is something that there is collaboration within.
there is something that is being hooked from within.
Exactly.
And used.
Yes.
Wow. Now let's dive into the story of Moses. How does Moses, what can we learn from Moses that can help us?
Moses is an interesting character. Some time ago, I was asked by some friends of mine to think through how the whole conversation of finishing strong and being built to last.
Yes.
And I was tasked to think I felt led to think about failure. How do we because how do we factor in the whole issue of failure in our chances of finishing strong and being built to last? And so I began looking at characters in the Bible, and I got stuck at Moses. I got stuck at Moses because he's a very interesting story, because he is able to mix the whole thing of being built to last, and he mixes failure in there and bouncing back from failure and all that. So in interrogating the issue of failure in the life of Moses, that's when I thought, no, there are some pitfalls here. There are some things, if you're not careful about, they can easily lead to disaster.
Yes.
And we may not have the privilege of bouncing back like Moses.
Yes.
Okay, there's a place he bounced back, but there's a place where he was not able to bounce back. It was over for him. But his story is such an interesting story. It's a sweet and sour story. Okay, that's why I'm intrigued by it. And I don't think I've even unpacked it fully. So just scratching the surface.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Moses, for the longest we celebrate him. And of course, it's rightly so.
Yes.
He was a great leader, leading an entire nation who out of Israel, out of Egypt, going to the promised land.
Yes.
Secondly, leading a people who have been in slavery for 400 plus years.
Yes.
Probably when you refer to the God that he speaks has sent him, these guys, 400 years, honestly, they probably have forgotten their God.
Yeah.
And now you want to lead them back to this God. I can imagine the things he had to contend with and deal with. And so what are some of the pitfalls we see in his life?
And I think it's good to just continue painting the context. Context is king. They say context is king. Context is king. But look at Moses. He is the greatest leader the Jews have ever had, quote unquote.
Yes.
Because up to now they don't even still fully regard Jesus as, the greatest. They still feel Moses is top. The only person that Moses can compete with to some extent is a bit of Abraham or David, but they come a distant second thereabout.
Yes.
And if you bring in the whole conversation of Jesus, for many of them they still struggle.
Yeah.
It's for us who are Christians, those who have become born again, that now see Jesus as a fulfillment of all that. And even Jesus, when he was coming to interact with the Jews, he was telling them, look here guys, relax. I have not come to do away with the law. And when he's talking about the law, he's talking about Moses. I have not come to challenge Moses as such. I've come to fulfill what Moses told you, because he gave them the law. Which governs their life. So this is a larger than life entity. But then you look closely at his life, and if you read the scriptures about the story of, I like the summary that we see in Acts, and maybe I can read it. Acts chapter 7 gives us a bit of a summary of Moses' life. And I'll read from verse, I'll start verse just a moment, verse 20.
Yes.
It talks about Moses' birth. It says that at that time Moses was born, a beautiful child in God's eye. His parents cared for him at home for 3 months. We all know the story. Moses survives. The carnage of other children. He's among the few that survive. Okay. Then the story is told of how he was taken up by Pharaoh's daughter. Stephen there continues to talk about that in Acts chapter 7 verse 21. Verse 22 says he was taught in all the wisdom of Egypt, of the Egyptians. Context is king. Egyptians were the most advanced civilization at that time. He was in Harvard. He had aced Harvard. There's nothing that was taught in Harvard of those days that he had not learned, and he had mastered. And he was the one probably who gave the speech, the graduation speech on his graduation. And there had never been any other student like him, because he had learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. And he was powerful both in speech and in action. The historian Josephus tells us that he had led several wars and had come back victorious. Before he was 40, he had proven himself. And so he had grown up well, but then something else was happening in the background. As he's going through this, in the age, between the age of being born and teen years, around that time, he was in the care of his mother. And his mother was whispering certain things to him, that you are special, that you have a mission, that you have been called to deliver the children of Israel, that we are banking on you, we are depending on you. You're the one that will save us. You know the way African parents talk to this only child who is going to the university, and nobody else has gone to the university in that family, in that clan. They say, you are our hope. If you must take things seriously there, because if you fail, we are all doomed. We even sold all the cows
to take you to school.
Take you to school. So Moses was that guy, and the mother whispered, and the mother, anchored him so well, that by the time Moses turns 40, listen to what happens. He gets into an altercation with an Egyptian, because he's coming to check out his people whom the mother has talked to him about. And he gets into an altercation with an Egyptian and kills the Egyptian. Okay? Once he kills the Egyptian, he comes back again a few days later, gets into a situation, tries to resolve the situation, but then the way the Jews respond, those who are trying to help respond, sends a strong message to him. Now listen to what Stephen says about Moses in that situation. And that's where the pitfall comes in. He says, Moses assumed. Verse 25. Moses, I don't know what other versions say. I'm using the New Living Translation. Other versions say differently.
The New King James says, for he supposed.
He supposed. Moses made assumptions. Made an assumption. Moses was well prepared in many ways. No one could be more prepared than Moses to take on the task of delivering the children of Israel from the bondage they were in. More than Moses. No one had the equipment, no one had the connections, no one had the access, resources,
everything.
Everything, no one. He had been brought up well in both worlds. He was ambidextrous. This was the ideal person. Yet he made an assumption. And I suspect that probably all that preparation contributed to him making an assumption. So he made several assumptions, and those are the pitfalls that we're going to talk about. And this pitfall is the pitfall of assuming. Never assume.
Never assume.
Never assume.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Moses made an assumption, and a lot of assumptions. This is the beginning of us seeing some of the assumptions. And from how you've painted that story, I think when you feel prepared, when you feel you have it all together, it's very easy to assume. That's what's coming out here.
By the way, I normally say this about very gifted leaders, because in my experience as a pastor, I've worked with several gifted leaders. And I've gotten to a place where whenever a very gifted person comes into my space, I red alert. Red alert.
Red alert.
Everything goes red, because I call it the curse of the gifted. They make assumptions. They make assumptions. And it's because of the more gifted you are, the more you are prone to make assumptions. the more anointed you seem to be, the more you are prone to make assumptions. The more people celebrate you, the more you are prone to make assumptions. And that becomes a problem. I mean, even Jesus is careful not to assume certain things. He is not, and we'll talk about that. He did not assume the people around him. He did not assume their allegiance.
No.
He says he did not give himself fully to them because he knew what was in their hearts. He did not just assume, hey, they are celebrating me. Now
I remember even when the disciples walked away because of his teaching. He didn't assume the others who have remained will still follow.
He says, you guys, do you also want to go? Okay, let's not make assumptions here because this is not the way we operate. And again, back to that thing of if you're watching this and you're probably in that category of very gifted people, you probably are the people that
we should even increase that scope. Very gifted, very educated, because Moses was educated in all the wisdom of Egypt. You know, very educated, very resourced. And you've had very connected.
And also you've had a string of victories. A string of victories. Things are happening. Things are happening. I mean, you have the Midas touch. Everything you touch turns to gold. That's the moment to call yourself to a meeting and say, is there something that I am not
missing?
I'm not taking care of. I'm missing. Because many times you may find that there could be something. Let me tell you, it does not matter who you are. All of us have got a blind side.
That's true.
All of us have got
usually
a blind side.
Focus creates blind spots.
Blind
when you're
spots.
Focused on your vision, it creates blind spots. So that's why we need to be careful.
You need to be careful. So you don't, the opposite of assuming is you become intentional and you become careful. Okay? And you don't take things for granted. Okay, so number one, Moses assumed it was time for him to deliver the children of Israel. He assumed it was time. He said, look here, guys. I've been through college. I've done PhD. Now I'm not even going for PhD. Now it's fellow. Okay, now I'm just not to be called Dr. Moses. I'll just be called Mr. Moses. You know, there's a level you're called Mr. of academia. But it's not the Mr. for Mr. Richard and Mr. No, it's Mr. They don't know what to do with you. You're too much. Moses was like, look here, I've had, a great orator. I'm ready to lead Maandamano. I'm ready to lead serious Maandamano here, and Pharaoh must listen to us. Guys, the reason why I was being prepared, and I'm ready. You know, there's a politician. There's a politician in Luo Nyanza who his campaign would be one rally. He would not even go for rallies. He would just do one rally. And in that rally, he would stand up and talk about his academic accomplishments. And then he would ask, is there anybody else who can beat that? So if that person can show up, then I'll be okay. So then he goes and he wins. He's now one of the governors there. But very sharp fellow. And sometimes we make that assumption. We are ready. We are ready.
It's my time.
It's my time. Okay, there are two things. He thought it is his time. Let me, for the sake of our conversation today, let me work on three assumptions. He made an assumption about his timing, that it was time. He made an assumption about his readiness, which is connected to timing. And he made an assumption about the people, that the ground equal ready for me. It's now ready for the mighty man of God. But he was wrong. He was wrong because the ground was not ready. And they made him know. They made him know. Number two, he was not prepared. He was not ready. In as much as he had gone through the best
with
preparation.
all that preparation, he wasn't prepared.
I told you context is he was not ready. He needed 40 more years. Where? Not in the colleges, not in the halls of academia, not in the privileges of the palace and connections and power, not negotiating in hotels about power deals. No. He needed to understand the wilderness. He needed to understand that wilderness, and he had not factored that.
And that tells me something. That tells me that your assignment determines the level of preparedness.
Oh, yes.
Because you may think you are prepared, but the assignment God has for you requires a different kind of preparedness.
Yeah. And the bigger the dream, the bigger the vision, the more the preparation. It is as simple as that.
So this guy, he thought his preparedness was the education, the connection, the nini. What he didn't realize is where he was going to lead these people, he needed to be prepared for that journey.
Yeah, before he would come back to the palace to negotiate, he had to, he had to learn how to, because after he has finished negotiating, he was going to take these people through the wilderness for 40 years. 40 solid years. So he had to learn how to be there for 40 years. Because he had never learned. He had never stayed for a day without grapes. He had never, I don't think he had even fasted. So he needed to know how to sit in the wilderness. And your water is in
when the resources are scarce, water is not there.
Water is not there. He had to learn how to be on the lookout for the creatures. He had to learn the back routes of the wilderness. He had to learn. By the time Moses was leading these people in the wilderness, he had known the wilderness in
like
and
the
out.
back of his hand.
And he did not have distractions.
No.
He was all alone with the sheep. And the sheep and the goats, they, he had to figure out how to, take care of them, watch over them, spend nights out there away from family, because those days, shepherding was not a one-day thing. You could come back in the evening. Shepherding was a month's thing. You could go for months with the sheep and the goats and stay in the wilderness and sleep under trees and, in the peril of lions and all those things. He had to learn all those intricacies before now he can lead the people, qualified to lead the people. And sometimes there's a wilderness we go through and we are wondering, I thought I had the time. I thought this is my time. I thought time is going by. Years are going by. And you're wondering, what is it? Probably God is preparing you. And we assume certain things. We assume God's preparation sometimes. And it can be dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
We assume and it can be dangerous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I need to ask you the question before we even go further. What have you been assuming? Are you assuming it's your time? Are you assuming you are ready? Are you assuming the people are for you? What could be the assumption that can become your pitfall? That's a seller moment. Reflect as we continue with the conversation.
So let me go back to timing.
Yes.
There's a song we used to sing. And it's connected to timing and preparation. Those two are almost, tied at some place.
Yes.
We used to sing, you must wait on the Lord. Learn your lessons well. In His timing, He will tell you what to do, where to go, what to say. It's a very old song.
Yes.
A very boring song. And actually, it just repeats that phrase.
Yes.
And one of the best ways to beat this assumption of timing, because there's some leaders who have begun churches and they're not supposed to have begun churches. There's some leaders who have begun ministries. There's some leaders who've burst out of you're under some leadership.
Yes.
And you burst out to start your own thing, and it's not the right time. And that timing is not necessarily in the hands of the leader that you are under.
No.
It's in the hands of God. And one of the things that you must be very clear, and you must really do your best is to seek God, to be very clear with God about timing.
Yes.
It's a very dicey one, because sometimes you can assume God has given you the green light.
Yeah.
And sometimes the best way to know God has not given you the green light is when you go out there and it doesn't work and you have to come back. But you must always be patient, and you must be open to the fact that, it's only God who understands the times and the seasons. And you must seek him. You must ask him. You must inquire of him. Is it time for us to do this?
So let me put, now that you've brought that out, that assumption, you must then, from what you're saying, it's only God who has the right timing. So you must avoid, thinking that your timing is determined by external factors.
Yeah, and they could play a part.
Yes.
And you need to factor all this. What I'm saying is that there are many factors. The chief is God.
God, yes.
Once that is in place, then there are other factors, including the leadership you're submitted to,
yes,
including circumstances around you.
Yes.
And so now you begin to factor all these things. Don't just jump. What we are saying here is that don't just jump into the action because you feel you need to jump into the action. Don't just rush into this thing because you think you must rush into this thing. There always has to be a place to pause and say, should I go? I mean, David says, God, should I attack? God says, no, wait for the sound of the mulberry tree. Even when you hear the wind rushing through the mulberry tree, then you can attack. Okay? Paul says, man, I feel there's opportunity out in a certain place.
Yes.
But then, no. God says, no, you don't go there. You need to go somewhere else.
Yes.
All right? And it's good to be open to that. And I don't think Moses was open to that. So he went ahead and killed somebody because he was so sure it's his time. He went ahead and took extreme actions because he was sure it is time. And you need to be very cautious when it comes to the issue of timing.
Yes.
And wait on the Lord and get to hear from him, get to hear from godly counsel, and not just one person, 2, 3 people. Look at the circumstances, weigh all that stuff and put together and make a decision. Now, does it mean that you will be 100% right?
No.
Not necessarily. So you must be open to the fact that you could still be wrong. And when you find you're wrong, don't beat yourself too much.
Yes.
Go back to square one.
Be flexible and
flexible. Yeah, that's what we are saying here. But Moses was like, this is my time, let me go for it. He even kills a person and even now begins to reorganize the people, and they tell him, look here, guy, wait.
That just tells me that, it reminds me that scripture, he that believeth does not make haste. So that even if I feel it's my time, I shouldn't rush into it, jump into it. I should practice waiting, that patience. We want to take a break, a short break, and continue with this conversation. I can see a few of us, getting into the conversation. Thank you so much for your comments. Lewis is saying assumption is one of the pitfalls for every leader. Moses Okoth is saying true, never assume. Dama Zisa is saying Moses needed to understand the wilderness. Clinton and Tingamu is saying, someone please bless me with something to feed. Okay, so this one is asking for, this one is looking for help. So we want to take a short break, and we'll be able to pick up this conversation immediately after the break. Only 2 minutes break, so stay tuned and reflect on what we've just begun the talking points we've begun to have. And I think, as you reflect with your life. Is there places where you've missed it because you've assumed? And, you could be able to share your feedback as we continue with the conversation. So see you in a moment.
Nico Works Now Trust is a program that comes to you on Elevate TV every Friday at 7:30 p.m. In this program, we dwell into the journey of small and micro enterprises in the country.
Tulikuwa tunafulia watu manguo wengine walikuwa wameandikwa house girls, lakini saa hii tumetoka hapo.
You can get the story from domestic workers to people handling 150,000 shillings per month. They're just 13 people. We look at the challenges that they're facing.
The city council will harass you for anything, whether you have documents or not. Roads, traffic, such things really affect us.
And we tap into the opportunities available in the sector.
Kio unit tulikuwa tunaambiwa tusikue employees, tujaribu tukue ma-employers. So nikaamua naweza anzisha kakaoshi kadogo mashinani.
So nikaona badala niuze gas pekee, nikaanza na vitabu kidogo, books za kuandika na stationery. Nikasoga hivyo, after some time nikaona I still can sell the textbooks.
Join me, Collins Otas, every Friday at 7:30 p.m. on Elevate TV, and let us journey together in this show.
Reading is a gateway to knowledge and wisdom. It allows us to learn from the experiences of others and to be inspired by their stories. At Elevation Bookshop, we have a wide selection of books on a variety of topics, including leadership, purpose, marriage, finance, and more. Visit us today at Kenya Cinema Plaza along Moy Avenue, or call us on 0748 902 225, or visit our Facebook, Instagram and Twitter pages at Elevation Bookshop to place your order. We deliver orders countrywide. Elevation Bookshop, enrich your life.
Welcome back as we continue with an amazing, wonderful conversation we are having on leadership pitfalls, looking at the life of Moses. So karibu sana if you are joining us for the first time in this particular show. My name's Albert Shitakwa, Reverend at Green Pastures Tabernacle, Hebron City. And today I'm honored to have a good friend of mine, Reverend Richard Chogo from Deliverance Church Umoja, as we have this discussion on the leadership pitfalls. The first part, we have really talked, set the stage, just trying to understand the life of Moses. And we talked about the assumptions that he made that became pitfalls in his life. And so feel free to share and talk to us, ask any question you would want to ask. It's a live show, and so we can be able to engage you on that. Share your feedback, your thoughts, and your comments. And, and I've read a few of these feedbacks that have come. My advice to Clinton, who is seeking for help, there are right channels for you to use in order to get help if you really need help, so that you can be vetted. And then that way help can be given. But if you're using this platform as a way to take advantage of people, we want to encourage people, direct Clinton to the right forum for help. And so feel free to share your thoughts and your feedback as we continue on with this conversation. So we talked about the three assumptions that Moses had. We had timing, readiness, and ground or people.
But let me just make a little comment about timing, then we can move to the others.
Yes.
I hope it's going to be a little comment. About timing, there's also the other side of timing, that sometimes we feel like let's say Moses did not take that action. There's sometimes God puts us on hold. Let's say now he's in the wilderness.
Yes.
God puts you on hold. And years are going by.
Yeah.
And opportunity for you to do, you really desire to do certain things.
Yes.
But honestly, opportunity, for some reason, God has allowed roadblocks.
Yes.
And opportunity is not there. And I've implicated God there, but God has not, allowed you in His love, in His mercy. He has not allowed you. It's taking time. Joseph is in the pit.
Yes.
He's in the prison, and he has a dream. He was so sure God wanted him to do X, Y, Z, and even the attempt.
Yes.
You're so sure. Let me use the example of a church planter. You're so sure God had put it in your heart to plant churches. And the opportunity has not been. Nobody's giving you that chance. Nobody's even looking at you, considering you. You're making an attempt, it's not working, and you're there on hold. And sometimes you can easily get into depression because you're thinking time is flying. I'm running out of time. I'm running out of time. And so you desperately begin to do certain things because I'm running out of time. If God has put it in your heart, and circumstances have not allowed you, keep nurturing this thing in prayer.
Yes.
Keep operating like Abraham, who even against hope, he continued to hope.
Yes.
It's funny how you can hope against hope, against whatever. Even when things are working against his hope, he continued to hope and to believe. Because, when God's Kairos moment comes, when that timing comes, he wants to find you in a posture like Joseph, in a posture where you're with him.
Yes.
You're with him. If you're with him, then you're going to get it. And it's never too late.
Yes.
I mean, Moses was taking up leadership at 80. Now, true leadership.
True leadership.
The one that God wanted him to do.
But when he thought it was time, it was 40. He
was 40 years old. 80. And it's important to it's important to understand that Moses at 80 and even at 120, the Bible says that he was strong. It means that he could have still led the children of Israel beyond. People are saying there's a president who was ending his 2 terms here in Kenya. They're saying he's still young. He can organize for another term. Moses could have done another 40 years. He could have gone to 160. He died at 120, but he was still strong.
And the Bible describes him strong even in his death.
In his death. That means, and we'll talk about it at some point, that means God's intention was for him to take the children of Israel into the promised land. And settle them. So, but if you talk to him at 40 and told him you are still too young, he would have, beaten you. And I know some people who are watching. Time has flown, you've made mistakes, you've failed, you've all these things, but there's still that car dream, and you're thinking, maybe it's not for me. You will be surprised if you will not give up on that dream, and you still go back and wait upon the Lord. You may be surprised that God may use you to accomplish something the last 5 years of your life, and that thing will be phenomenal. Look at the story of Anna. I mean, Penina is getting children left, right, and center. Penina looks at her husband, she gets pregnant. Penina thinks about the husband, she gets pregnant. But Hannah, they are trying Mukobero, they are trying this, all this stuff. She's doing all these things, and she's not getting. And time is flying until when she gets a child. We never talk about Penina's children because we don't know them. Nothing is said about them. But we all talk about Samuel. Samuel. And it's not only Samuel that she got. She got Samuel and other children. Because God's timing is the best, as we normally say. And so somebody probably is watching this and you're at a place where it seems like time has flown. This God's timing thing is not making sense, and you're getting discouraged. Don't get discouraged. I mean, don't assume that also it's over. Don't assume it's over and
I'm
you give
late.
up and close. I'm late. And I think at some point, probably even Moses could have felt it's over until the burning bush came. All right? But you made assumption about timing, and may God help us. All right?
Amen.
Yep.
Go on.
Now,
to the next...
maybe a quick one on the next thing.
Yes.
He made assumption about preparation. Okay, which is connected to timing.
Yes.
And we've mentioned something about it.
Yeah.
He never knew that there are some elements he needed to add to his thingy to prepare. Okay?
He thought he was prepared
with
what he went through.
Yes.
But he didn't realize there was other stuff.
Yes. The antidote to this assumption that makes people to, not read another book. The antidote is to always put an L plate. Never assume you're fully prepared. Okay? We never arrive in this thing. I mean, you've been in this thing, Reverend, for quite a while.
Yes.
You never arrive.
No.
And that's why you find some people cannot sit in some conferences or some places. Yes, I have a conference fatigue, but does not mean that I should stop learning.
No.
So I have other ways in which I have to learn.
Yes.
I will read books.
Yes.
I will engage in conversations. I'll get into that mode. Because I don't think God is through with preparing me. God is through with working on me.
Yes.
God is through with getting me in the frame that he needs to get me into for his purposes to be fulfilled through me. There's always room for me to be worked on.
Yes.
And so the assumption that I'm ready, that I am prepared, that I have it, I've got it together, is, we have, in my position and probably in your position, you've had probably one or two young people coming out of Bible school. They're beaming, they're saying, hey, now I've been trained. Give me a chance. And all that.
I'm ready.
But what you do is you listen to them, and you're like, okay. There's a friend of ours, a mutual friend, who went to see, one of our spiritual leaders. He says, I'm from Bible school. I'm ready. And the pastor called the janitor of the church. He says, this young man was saying, I want opportunities to preach, to teach in the church. He says, so he asked the young man, have they been preparing you to be preachers, or have they been preparing you to be servants? He got wise. He says, they are preparing us to be servants. So you call the janitor. Janitor, so and so, come. Okay. When is it the day to wash the church today? He says, yes, the people are about to come. Also, this one, take him. He washes the church. Then after you wash the church, then let's talk later. And the person had to wash the church, wash the washrooms in the place. And now he's a very senior person within the same church.
Yes.
He's a mutual friend of ours.
Yes.
And we had to learn that. Because sometimes preparation is not, what we think it is. There could be other factors. So you have to be open. You have to be open, and you have to be very flexible. The way you are saying flexibility with time, flexibility with God's dealings. And sometimes,
so you have to keep yourself in a learning mode.
Yeah.
Never think I am now prepared.
Yeah.
I no longer need to read, no longer need to do.
Exactly.
I'm prepared.
And never assume the instruments of preparation. Because those instruments of preparation could be diverse.
Yes.
I mean, God, you look through the scriptures.
Yes.
The people God is preparing to use them. He uses all sorts of instruments. God can use anyone.
Yes.
God can use anything to prepare you. Never assume. Never take for granted. Especially things he allows to come into your life. Never take them for granted. The tragedies.
I would even imagine that every stage we are at is a preparation for the next.
Yeah.
So we are always preparing.
Yeah. I mean, every moment of your life, every circumstance is a lesson. You're in class. And you need to learn. You need to learn the lessons. The worst thing you can come out of an incident in your life with is not having learned anything. You must always come up with a lesson.
Yes.
You must always come out of any experience, good or bad. The wisdom of God is such that when He allows anything to come your way, in that situation, there is the seed of the next level, and it's in the form of a lesson. It's in the form of a lesson. And we sometimes don't see it because we assume there's no lesson.
Yes.
We assume God cannot change this.
No, we assume we graduated, so we are no longer learning.
Yeah. And so God sends an instrument to deal with you, to prepare you, but you take it for granted. You mishandle it. You mishandle the lesson. And so I've learned not to take for granted anything that happens around me. That's why there's a practice called the power of reflection, which is an interesting practice, which I learned some years ago. And it is a practice of pausing, probably you could say 15 minutes before you go to sleep, or at the end of the day, or whatever, or in the morning when you wake up, and reflect on the previous day. Reflect on what happens to you. And in that place of reflection, it's good to ask God, is there a lesson that I should have learned? So and so handled me badly, and I felt so bad about it. Was there a lesson? Are you trying to show me something? Okay? Now, the incident that Moses went through, it exposed something which Moses should have taken care of. Moses had been prepared with all, when it comes to all the learning and the preparations, the giftings, the how to speak, but he had not been helped to deal with anger. All along, Moses had anger. And probably the anger was because of how he had seen his people being mishandled. And so he had brewed anger. And that anger was dangerous. You could call it...
He saw the injustice. And anger was building.
And there was anger and maybe bitterness. Okay? And so that incident that happened, him killing the Egyptian, rejecting him, that was an opportunity for him to deal with his anger now in the wilderness. Okay? So Moses had an opportunity. And so sometimes we may assume we are ready. But there's a thing about us, and God has a way of provoking. My bishop says sometimes God provokes your mind to reveal your heart. Okay?
I like that. Provokes your mind to reveal your heart.
He can send a circumstance that will provoke your mind and your emotions and all this, but he's just revealing your heart so that you can deal with that anger. Moses did not deal with it. And let me surprise you. Moses never dealt with that anger properly.
By the way, he didn't.
He didn't. Because at the age of 120, Moses had another opportunity. The people of God angered him. And he became angry. And this time he said, let me improve. He said, last time I killed somebody. This time I'm not going to kill someone. But I'm going to hit a rock. But Moses, by hitting the rock, ended up having bigger ramifications because he ended up not stepping. I told you that he was, at 120, he was still strong. Scripture says he could have led the children of Israel further, but because of anger.
He allowed anger. 120 from 40, you're talking 80 years later.
80 years later.
The guy is still having an issue with anger.
Never assume you're ready, man.
So the 80 years later, the guy hasn't dealt with anger.
And he saw it 40 years ago. No, he said it 80 years ago.
But even 40 years later, because he broke the 10 Commandments.
The guy had anger issues. But he never did. And he was the meekest man on earth. That's what the Bible says.
Yeah, can imagine, you're talking about meekness, which is strength under control.
Rev Albert, this thing of preparation is so, especially when you talk about internal configuration. It is so, that's why I'm so careful. I never assume I have it together. And when I'm pointing fingers, I carefully point fingers. Because this is so complicated. that you could be the meekest man, and God could even have a testimony, and everybody has a testimony, but you have anger issues.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't see that one. Meekness, the guy is considered, written testimony, the meekest man, but he still had anger.
Anger issues. And it's so embedded and so hidden that you probably don't see it until when an incident comes. That's why we must always be willing to have God deal with us. That prayer that the psalmist makes, search me, O God, and know my heart. See if there is anything that has not been dealt with.
Yes.
Help me to deal with it. That is preparation.
Yes.
Now, the most important part of preparation for God to use you is not the learnings and all this. It is God's dealings with aspects of you, aspects of you that are negative, aspects of you that are. And let me tell you, even the most anointed man of God here on earth.
Yes.
I know we treat them as though they don't have any shortfalls. They have shortfalls.
They have shortfalls.
And they need somebody to talk to them. That's why it's important to have people that can put a mirror before you. That's why it's important and you can continue to listen at whatever level. Because at the level at which Moses was, that anger was more costly. Than when he killed them.
Maybe than the beginning, by the way. Because at the beginning, the people told him, who made you? But now, he is already recognized as a leader. So the challenge, people have seen Aaron and Miriam being punished for trying to challenge him. Now, you're at a place where nobody can tell you.
This is a man who would see God face to face. In fact, God says, all the other people I talk to them using parables, but this is a man I show up. Never in history. I don't know, maybe there are one or two other people who have come up. There are some people in the recent revival history that have claimed that they have had those incidences. But at that point, he was a man that God was most intimate with. Yet he had something that had not been dealt with. We need to be very careful. That's why Paul says, you that think you stand. Watch.
Watch lest you fall.
Lest you fall. And you'll not fall because of the intensity of the attack from outside.
No.
You will fall because of some intricacies inside of you that have not been dealt with. And probably you're not aware of them. It's important to constantly receive feedback. It's important to constantly allow the Holy Spirit to talk to you and work on you. Because some of those things hidden within are very dangerous. And it just takes a flip. And people are like, oh, so-and-so was a mighty man, how could he fall? Don't talk like that.
Yes. By the way, Moses' departure was abrupt to the people. It was difficult. They took a month to mourn. Is it a month or more than a month?
They have never, up to now in the synagogues, they have never gotten over Moses. and I'm going to say something about that issue that had to be dealt with. When he was when he was 40, it costed a life. Okay? It costed a life when he was 40. But when he was 128 years later, it costed more for him. So for him, it costed his reputation because he killed. So he was regarded a murderer. But at 120, and he had risen in responsibility, it costed him matters destiny. He could not step into the promised land. And God could not hear anything about it. And God was not willing to give him a chance. There's a level you reach if you have not dealt with some things. You cannot afford to make a small mistake. You will not bounce back. You will not bounce back.
It can be the way, when you talk about bouncing back, I always remember Samson, where he was making mistakes and he kept coming back and doing exploits. Then one day he tried.
He assumed. What did he do? He assumed that God was with him.
So there is a level you get, there is no bouncing back. You've got to have dealt with some things.
That's why humility and that's why I love when Paul says he's aware that he has a thorn in his flesh to keep him humble. He's aware of that. That
knowledge helps. That knowledge that, I'm not it. I'm not there.
Yeah.
I still need to be prepared. I need to be aware of my weaknesses.
Yes.
I think that knowledge is keen.
It's very critical, and it's important. I don't know if we still have time. And
I think we still do. Yeah, we
few
still
more
do.
Minutes.
Yes.
We can talk about his assumption about people.
Yes.
Okay. So Moses assumes that people will celebrate him and receive him with a red carpet.
Yes.
And they will join his party. And so he offers his candidature and they reject him unanimously. Yet he's the best candidate. That we make a lot of assumptions as leaders.
And you know, he's the best from a human point of view.
Yes.
He was actually the best candidate.
Yes.
In the sense that there was no other Jew who had gone through the kind of preparedness, exposure, like from a human standpoint, than him.
Yeah.
So he was standing tall amongst his peers. There was no one else.
And we make those assumptions as leaders when we get into spaces. We assume that people will treat us in a particular way because of the worth we think we have. When they don't do that, they become enemies. You begin to have bitterness.
Yes.
You begin to have anger. You begin to have all these things, and it jeopardizes your leadership. Do you know, people are not under any obligation to treat you the way you want them to treat you. Okay? They are not under any obligation. Get over it if you're a leader. If you want to survive in this leadership business, please, I beg you, don't make assumptions about how people will receive you and handle you. Okay? Even those who are above you, those who are under you, those who are your peers, they don't know you. They don't know you.
I think that's a very critical point, because there is a level of entitlement that comes with that assumption that people look at me and certainly I'm a leader, and so there is this entitlement I have. And so it's very easy to expect to be handled in a certain way, to be treated in a certain way, to be received in a certain way.
So you become annoyed when it's not done.
Like Naaman,
Yes.
the way he was expecting the man of God to handle him.
Yes.
And he almost never got his miracle because he was annoyed at the reception.
And so we make assumptions, so we are not able to. I was given an assignment some time ago to lead a particular church. And when I stepped into that space, some of the leaders who I had to work with were very troublesome, Reverend. They used to give me difficult moments. We would discuss things late into the night, and they were giving me a hard time. But now in hindsight, in God's mercy, He allowed me to continue working with them.
Yes.
In as much as every bit of me was feeling like, why do I need to work with them? And I did not have to work with them. I did not have to work with them. In fact, I should have called them and told them, you are on this team on invitation. And I'm the one who invited you. So don't bring me this nonsense here and asking me difficult questions. But somehow God in His mercy allowed me to keep working with them.
Yes.
Let me tell you, Reverend, some of them became some of the best assets. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years later.
Yes.
Than at the time when I was working with them.
Wow.
In fact, in one of those spaces, the person who used to ask me the most difficult questions, and I don't know if he's watching, ended up becoming the pastor of that church. When I transitioned. And he's an amazing guy. He's a brilliant guy. He's a mutual friend.
Yes.
He's an amazing guy. But you should know the questions that he used to ask me when I just checked in.
Yes.
And that helped me because I was green-owned. Some of the decisions I was about to make were dangerous decisions.
So if you assumed that...
an enemy. Yeah.
Wow.
You may assume some people are enemies, but they're not enemies. They're instruments.
I mean, this is an amazing conversation. I'm thinking, and time is up.
Yeah.
But this is an amazing conversation. I hope we can be able to pick it up sometime and continue on with the conversation that we have had. I think I want you to reflect, even as it's a post. It's a post. So I want you to reflect about it, and then we can be able to pick it up sometime later. I can see, Rahadia Chogo, your wife, we need to deal with some things early enough in life. Yeah, that's great. Otherwise, bouncing back becomes an impossibility or an uphill task.
Some things I have.
Yeah, true. Janet, then we have Lewis again. God provokes your mind to reveal your heart. I think that's something to take home. Wilbur Wanyonyi, great conversation, men of God. Thank you so much. We need to wrap it up right now because of time, but we'll continue with this conversation. It's a post. Rev, thank you so much. Maybe 10 seconds or 15 seconds, parting shot.
Yeah, I think I would want to suggest to us that, as I said earlier, the opposite of assumption is becoming intentional. Mm-hmm. And this is what the psalmist prays and says, Lord, teach me to number my days, that I may gain a heart of wisdom. Mm-hmm. I will not take for granted any moment. I will not take for granted people around me. I will not take for granted timing. I will not take for granted God's permission. Mm-hmm. And so my prayer is that you will not take things for granted. But every moment of life, every incident, you will look at it carefully and value it. That's how you gain the heart of wisdom. Not assuming, but by being intentional about life.
Amen. Amen. I'm trusting that if Pastor Chogo will not have traveled, I'll convince him to continue with this conversation next week. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. God bless you. Thank you for your feedback and your comment. Let's keep the conversation going. See you next week, same time, same place. Baraka.